And welcome back to the suspended fantasy hockey podcast, the postponed fantasy hockey podcast. What do we consider this now?
I don't
Because
know,
fantasy
man.
hockey is definitely not.
This isn't even.
How,
This isn't. This isn't fantasy hockey at this point.
no,
Is it even a podcast? It's just.
I don't know.
It's just our podcast.
Are we
now.
just talking heads now?
It's like the Gambian Stockenborg podcast.
Yeah, it's like, what are we even,
Gambian
what are we
Brandon?
doing here?
Gambian
I mean,
Brandon.
are you? Can we confirm for the folks on the show? Are you still touching your face?
Yeah, I'm right now. I am literally right now,
Terrible,
but not in
terrible human
public. I don't know. I
Not
wash
in
my
public.
hands.
You wash your hands. Okay, at least we've made some improvement here. Thank goodness. Anyways, so here's how this show is gonna go. Normally this would be a weekend preview, but now this might be an end of season preview. I don't know. So here's what we'll do. We're gonna go over what we know about this suspension, what has been out there in the news, and then we're going to apply what we know and the different scenarios potentially to what it could mean for your fantasy season. If you didn't know already, Brandon and I used to work for a fantasy company called Draft, so we do have some experience with how fantasy companies tend to handle game cancellations, postponements, that kind of thing. And while it wasn't necessarily always, it was mostly daily fantasy, there's still a lot of things technically that can be applied from there to what's happening now. So hopefully that might give you some insight into how Yahoo, Fantrax, ESPN, these other sites might handle what's going on. Then on top of that, we'll talk about specific league stuff. So how should you handle payouts? What do we think? How should you handle roster adjustments? And should you let people make roster adjustments? Shouldn't you not? That kind of thing. And then lastly, we'll talk about injured players who might be able to help you if this season is delayed a little bit. We can go over their timelines, who we like the most, rank them a little bit, because who doesn't like ranking things? And that'll pretty much be it. I mean, hopefully it kind of helps in the lull. I know people are kind of looking for something to do with hockey being over, so maybe us talking about this helps out a little bit. And as far as the podcast, we're going to continue to do some stuff here. We're going to continue to operate a little bit. We want to do the NHL Razzies still again, or the Fantasy Razzies. So we're going to do the Razzies a little bit earlier, I think, this year, even if, just something. I think even if the season comes back and it continues, I think it's just fun to have the Razzies to do in between while we wait for the season to hopefully kick back up. We'll also probably do some kind of way too early projections or rankings for next year at some point, just for fun. We'll probably just do some silly things like that, just to keep the content kind of going so that people can have something to listen to, something for us to discuss. It's never too early to start thinking about that. Did I miss anything?
We should just do a fantasy sim league.
We could do a fantasy sim league.
We just watch NHL 20 games play, and we discuss the relevance. No, let's never talk about.
I mean,
it
it's
again.
terrible. Never mind. I'm not even.
People
going
do
there.
that. Sim leagues are a thing.
Sim leagues are a thing. I was gonna say some kind of fantasy thing related. Never mind. Not going there. Not going there. Nope. Anyways, so let's start off first with what we know about the COVID virus, the coronavirus, and its impact on the NHL. So what made a big difference there was that the NBA had to cancel or suspend. Sorry, I need to use the word suspend, not cancel. And it was because Rudy Gobert, who is a trash human being, by the way, for how he acted and got it to his teammates. But the problem there, too, is that the NHL shares rinks with the NBA. And so it becomes a little bit of a bigger problem because it's a little harder to avoid these areas that might have been contaminated since they share. So I'm expecting, I don't know what you're expecting. I'm personally expecting that the NHL season's over.
Yeah, I think best case scenario, the playoffs happen later. That's like best case. Yeah, I don't see the regular season getting played out unless I just don't see it.
Yeah, I mean, I just don't see them coming back in a month. I don't think this necessarily clears up, because the thing is that, and this is I think what makes it so tough, is that it doesn't need to clear up in only one place. It needs to clear up in multiple cities, in multiple countries. And so say there's like one in Ontario, or there's something going on in Ontario. Maybe it's kind of slowed down in California, but it's picked up in Ontario, or it's picked up in Michigan. Like that. I mean, Detroit's not making the playoffs, so that's a terrible example, but you get my point. Yeah. Anyways, that's kind of the issue. Is a month from now, I don't see the entire country, both countries, being completely cleared of it. I just don't see it. And when you get out to 2 months from now, you're talking about a real tight playoff window there before the next season is supposed to start.
We're missing an obvious way to solve this problem. you
just
ship
hand the Rangers the cup.
all of the players to Antarctica, right? And then you just play there.
Wait, but what if a player? Oh, I guess so. I guess if they quarantine for 14 days, you
quarantine
go down to the South Pole,
and then fly everybody to the South Pole.
You're onto something here.
Yeah, I mean, televising it might be kind of a problem. Besides that,
it's okay. I mean, could they rig it? Yeah. Would they? Yeah. Do we care? Probably not.
All of a sudden, the Leafs win a cup. Who knew?
I know the Leafs would be coming back with a cup, and we'd all be like, "Wait, hold on. How did that happen again?"
They come back with 2 cups. Be like, wait a minute.
Wait, hold on.
How did they win twice?
They're like, you know what? You guys wanted hockey. Don't ask questions. We made it happen. That's all that matters. But the thing is, once you look at 2 months from now, I think the NHL right now probably has contingency plans for what happens if we come back in a month. What happens if we come back in a month and a half? What happens if we come back in 2 months? I think they have those plans in place. I just don't see it in a month being ready. I mean, there's even been some reports of next season being in jeopardy. Because again, you're talking about whole countries need to be kind of fine. So forgetting about that, let's talk about some scenarios here. Let's say...
Well, I want to add one thing to that.
Okay, go for it.
To talk about the point about... The second the NBA, like you mentioned, the NBA announced that they were postponing, the writing was on the wall for basically everybody else. The NHL, the easiest kind of, as you mentioned, do the sharing stadiums and whatnot is like a clear, has to happen almost type of situation. But one thing I have seen is Mavericks owner Mark Cuban actually told ESPN that so far he thinks the NBA season is not going to be canceled and that we may see NBA games all the way into August. Obviously, he's got to have the rosiest outlook because it means quite a bit to him. But that would be interesting if we wound up having essentially August NHL games as well.
The only thing with that is I feel like it's way too close to the next season.
Right.
At that point, I guess.
I mean, you still have to fit the draft in there somewhere, right? Like,
the
season has to end. All these like conditional picks need to be round up and assessed. The ones that are determined on this playoff schedule, and the draft needs to happen, and then you have to find time to actually start the next season.
They also can't practice.
Yeah.
So that's another question I have in my mind is like, do we really want to watch Stanley Cup playoffs of teams that haven't practiced in 2 months?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. I probably do. Okay?
Yes is the answer to that question.
You're right. I probably do, but I also do think it'd be terrible hockey. Like it would be interesting because I think everyone would be on a much more even footing than if it ends with momentum and all that. Everyone's kind of coming in exactly the same. It almost feels like, aside from literal talent on your team. I don't know. It's just it
they should
feels
just solve the whole thing by Fortnite tournament.
That would be interesting.
Or just have the players play NHL.
I mean, Line A would win, obviously.
Yeah.
Clearly. So anyways,
the whole thing by Chell.
So let's move into what it all means for fantasy. And let's focus on the first scenario here. Let's pretend that a month from now, all is well and the regular season continues. Is your expectation that, and for the record, Brandon is an engineer, so he understands this a little bit better than I do. Even I dealt with it more on the support and marketing side. But is your expectation if the season is delayed that fantasy will continue? Or are you assuming at this point fantasy is over?
It's hard to tell because these fantasy operators, honestly, NHL is not. If this was just the NHL season being suspended, I bet they would just end it. But because it's NBA as well, and NBA drives a lot more traffic, they're going to take a little bit of extra, they're going to try to see what they can do. And yes, we used to work at Draft, which if you guys know what that is, it was recently shut down. But Draft did daily fantasy sports. And typically when there was a postponement, it was just a refund from us. That said, in a season-long style, it's a little bit, they have to be able to roll with that. They have to be able to deal with rescheduling. So they can handle this technically. I just don't know, like the things that come to mind from an engineering perspective of like, what is this going to break would be like the end of the season. Like, can they adjust when the season's supposed to end that date? Can they? They've had set weeks on Yahoo. You have set weeks that end on April, in the beginning of April, first week of April.
Yeah.
Is that something they can adjust even? Like, what does that look like? Do they just add extra weeks? Would things like playoff brackets function properly? These are the technical things that are going to be tough to figure out, and they're going to have to decide whether it's worth it. I would imagine if it's delayed by anything that's fairly significant, even a month, I think it's going to be real tough. And it's I don't know how many dollars and cents are on the table, but I feel like smaller operators like Fantrax, unless they have very sophisticated engineering, which they, Fantrax has some stuff like that. They're fairly have a robust set of tools, so maybe they can do it. But I would imagine they're going to be the ones that shut down first.
Yeah.
And one operator may lead this, so we'll see.
I think the big questions I have are a few. Obviously, you can move postponed games into another window. When I talk about window, I'm talking about the week, right? So you have like week 1, week 2. We obviously had the St. Louis game, for example, move from one week to another week. So they can do that. That can be done. The question for me is that right now, it's not about moving the games into another window. It's about extending the window that already exists.
Or moving it to a week that does not exist.
While also keeping the stats that are already on paper. That's the tough part to me as well, is how do you I think the tough thing is that navigation of moving the week slate and also including all the stats. And so I feel like, to me, if I had to give a percentage so there's the regular season getting delayed, and then there's playoffs. If playoffs happen, the fantasy season is over. Like, if they go straight into playoffs, done. Fantasy season is over. That's it. Personally, I'm assuming the odds of the fantasy season being over around 75%.
Yep.
That's kind of internally how I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking there's like a 25% shot of Yahoo or somebody being like, you know what, we're going to fix this. And we're going to do it. Because you're right, the solution for NBA is going to be very similar to the solution for NHL.
Right.
And so there's an incentive to get both leagues right here and fix both of them, which does help. And like you're saying, if it was only NHL, we'd probably be just out of luck here.
No, they would have closed it already. I can guarantee it. There's just not enough money on the line.
Yeah, and I think that we obviously need the regular season to happen. And even then, here's the thing is that there's been a lot of talk too that if the regular season does happen, there's a chance that it's not all 82 games. Which at that point, you got to close fantasy. You've got to close fantasy anyways. There's not enough games to finish out your finals.
Yeah, I mean, most they'd only be playing somewhere 72. Between 10 and 15 games left or so.
The thing I've seen is them playing to 72 games. That's been the rumor I've seen. Is
for Vegas, aren't they already at 71?
Yeah, so that's the point, though, is that there's some teams who are behind, and then that way they'll have a chance to catch up.
You don't do like the points by percentage thing?
Yeah, instead you let everyone catch up to 72, which I think is what everyone is at. So everyone's at 71.
There must be a team that's at 72, and it's just done, right?
But then that's the thing is Vegas, like that.
Actually.
I actually don't think anyone is at 70. Oh, I think everyone was assuming today's games would happen. Everyone's at 71. But then at the same time, then you've got scheduling issues. How do you deal with teams that aren't at 71? And then how do you make it fair of teams that haven't played enough divisional
what
rivals?
If they were scheduled against a team that was going to be, that would have been their 73rd game?
Yeah, there's no good answer. That's the sad thing, is the only good answer is obviously play through the regular season, but that's not easy. That's just not really going to happen. Yeah, I mean, at this point, like I said, I think the big thing is 70, in my opinion, 75% season is over for fantasy. And I mean, the thing too is the language the NHL is using is hope to return, which is not very promising. It pretty much sounds like, look, we know what's going to happen. We're just delaying. I mean, there's no point right now, for example, saying, oh, the season's canceled. And then in a month from now, something miraculous happens. They're like, oh, actually we can play. And they have to bring it back. They're going to take these slow steps and do it as cautiously as they can, leave as many doors open while they do it. So now we move into the league setting. So let's say that the season is over today or yesterday, whenever it ended. Let's say the fantasy season is over. So there's two things here that has been a big talk of the town, if you will. Payouts and roster locks. Let's start with roster locks, because you are a snake, man, and already picked up all the injured players.
I mean, I'll be honest. If you're not picking up some of the players that are at least close, your Tarasengos, your Stamkoses, like, unless you've already come to a decision that you are locking rosters, make those pickups, honestly. Because nobody's going to be kind to you for not doing it. You're just going to lose a race because
But
you wanted to be altruistic about it. It's something
but
that
here's
you
the
need to have
thing.
a conversation about immediately. And if you decide to lock rosters, you can do that after the fact and just have people revert.
Yeah, I think that's what I was going to say is like, should it even be allowed? Because I mean,
Oh,
you did it
yeah,
before we ever even had the conversation.
right.
And you're the commissioner, Snake Man.
Well, I didn't do it on
So
ours. I did it, or did I? Maybe I did. But
I think you did.
I did it in one of the other leagues that we're co-managing. But the problem with locking the roster is like, what are you actually solving? Because what's going to happen is the second you unlock rosters, it's going to be a race to whoever is healthy now. So do you call these like the only thing that makes any sense to me is to blacklist players that were expected to be out, or rather were free agents and expected to be out until like close to the end of the season. Like if Tarasenko is a free agent right now, or was a free agent before the announcement, then he is blacklisted. He can't be added at all. And you apply that to Hamilton, to Stamkos, to Gensel, and then maybe you have something. But I don't know. That I think that's the only thing that makes any sense of fairness. I don't think you could like temporarily lock these guys, and I think trying to call a roster lock is difficult. Other than like, let people do what they will. Say the lock that you've frozen rosters at X time, but you need to get a majority vote too, or something. Because if the commissioner does it, unless everybody has a lot of trust in them, you could wind up with a scandal where they'll be like, "Oh, the commissioner didn't add the players in time, and that's why this is happening." And then that's what I would assume would happen in a public league. So,
Yeah.
it's a touchy situation. There's no true answer. I think the fairest thing is blacklisting players that are not added and would not have recovered, or likely would not have recovered by the end of your fantasy season. But what do you do by keepers? Where you already had this player, then I think you're just screwed. They're viable. If they're rostered, then they're okay. But I don't know.
I mean, if they're rostered, that's different. Like I already had Tarasenko in my points league.
Yeah.
So I think that's okay. I do think that, again, like I said, I think it's like a 25% shot that this actually continues. But I agree that you should blacklist players and just kind of lock rosters. I think, like you said, I think the thing is that you make a good point of locking rosters is not enough. You've got to blacklist players. And at this point, for most people, you're in your semifinals or kind of first round playoffs. So it's less people that you need to negotiate with to be like, look, this is what we're doing. And I think everyone can understand it. I think that doing that with rosters is the right thing to do. Personally, that's what I would say. And I mean, at this point, it wasn't until today that I saw tweets about it that I had even thought about roster locking, because I'm so under the assumption that this is just not going to continue, that I focus more on payouts in my mind. And it wasn't until today that I realized like, oh wow, yeah, people can do that. I thought about picking up Stamkos, but at the same time I was like, oh, people probably shouldn't be able to do that. So I would lean in the direction of talking to people and saying, you know what, let's blacklist these players. Then there are payouts. I think that I've seen a few good solutions. We actually got a tweet. We tweeted about the episode, and I don't know if Brandon, you saw this, but someone tweeted back at us at the last Greg and said, my league members came up with a funny idea to simulate the rest of the games on NHL 20 if it gets canceled and add up everyone's fantasy points.
I actually think that's a pretty decent way to do it.
That's a pretty funny, decent way to do it. I actually like that quite a bit. That's pretty funny. But
I mean, you have to have people that are like cool with it, but
yeah, of course. I mean, if it's friends, then I think that's fine. But I think that the fairest ways that I've come up with so far are refund everyone. That's one. I don't think
you're not getting refunded if you're not in the playoffs, in my opinion.
So that's where I was getting to. Is the next one is anyone still left in the playoffs splits the pot that's left. I also like the idea of giving the regular season winner a little kicker. I think that's fair as well. Even if that's not necessarily what you were playing to, I think that's just a kind of a right thing to do in a way. That person clearly had the best team and was probably the favorite going in. I think it's only fair to give them a little bit extra, unless they were eliminated. I think that refund of everything is a fine thing to do, especially like in a roto league. I think refund of everyone. Well,
roto leagues, I think you could just pay out. You don't even need to do anything in roto league. You just finish it. It's over.
Sure, you can, but at the same time, there may be complaints of third or fourth spot of I could have made a comeback, which is fair. You can't say no. I mean, it's 15 games.
It's not the
That's
same
a
as
lot of
head-to-head,
time.
though. Head-to-head is
not.
like way harder to figure out.
Yeah, head-to-head is way, way harder. I think that the most fair way to do it is pay out people who are still in playoffs and split it. I think that's the absolute, and in all my leagues, we've already discussed it. Of course, everyone this morning jumped on Yahoo Chat or wherever you do your chats, and everyone talked about it. And in every single one, we came to the same conclusion of whoever's left in playoffs splits the pot. So far, that seems to be kind of the consensus that everyone is coming to, at least for head-to-heads with playoffs and such. With Roto, I would probably say like top 4 gets money and split between top 4 or top 3, because I think there's going to be, even in a Roto or anything like that, there's going to be some kind of fall off, right? Like there's going to be you're saying, just pay out anyways. But I do think depending on how close the league is and everything, there's a case to be made that because there's 15 games left, a lot of things can happen. It's more fair to just pay out those top 3 or top 4 equally or evenly, unless of course there's a blowout. I don't know. I'm thinking of like best ball, for example, and I feel like it'd be pretty unfair to pay out a first place best ball team when second place could technically still catch up.
Wow.
Okay, so Brandon's audio kept breaking. Apparently, this episode is never meant to happen. So there might be a little bit of a weird cut in there somewhere, but I thought it'd be just funny to mention that because even our audio is trying to make it not happen, of course. So the last thing here to talk about before we wrap it up is players that are injured. So let's say you don't lock rosters. Who are your favorites to grab? I think there's an obvious top favorite.
Oh, yeah, Stamkos.
Obviously.
Gensel's up there, too, I think.
I think Gensel is out until next year. I don't think he's coming back this season.
Honestly, it's been so long, I don't even remember what his injury is.
Yeah, Dougie Hamilton is also another one. Bjorkstrand, a lot of people are going to get excited about, but his prognosis was 8 to 10 weeks. Stamkos was 6 to 8 weeks prognosis at the time of injury.
8 to 10 weeks. I mean, yeah. If it's a little over a month, you'll get Bjorkstrand. Yeah, Bjorkstrand's just not, he's fine, but he's not somebody to get super excited about or anything.
Even with Stamkos, I mean, that's kind of questionable at this point. Just he was supposed to be, his expected return was sometime in the first round of the playoffs or after the first round.
Pacioretty would be somebody if somebody dropped him, which is pretty viable considering he's supposed to be week to week.
Stone too.
Yeah,
Stone would be a great one. Who else is out there? Are we missing anyone that was injured? Tarasenko.
Yeah, Senko definitely.
He was expected to play this week.
I mean, what did happen? I honestly don't remember what Gensel's injury was. I just remember being like, well,
I think it's a knee. I'm pretty sure it's a knee injury.
Shoulder.
Quite sure it was a knee injury.
Shoulder surgery.
And I'm an idiot. Okay.
Or was this from previous? Nope, this is it. Let's see. Did they give a 4 to 6? No, he's like 4 to 6 months as of essentially the beginning of the year. So,
yeah.
I mean, they haven't updated him at all, so he's probably not going to be. It's basically the same thing that happened to Senko.
Yeah, pretty much.
Who else? Is there any? I mean, Erik Karlsson.
Rantanen. Erik Karlsson.
Nathan McKinnon also is supposed to be week to week. I don't think he got dropped early, but
I don't think anyone dropped him. Erik Karlsson was available in my keeper league, so he's definitely out there. No one touched him.
That's crazy.
He's been awful.
Yeah,
year.
I know.
Yeah, he's
Seth Jones. If you need him,
too.
Possible.
Yeah. Rantanen, obviously, I mentioned him.
Rantanen,
but
Kreider
Rantanen also was not far.
Yeah.
Kreider's a great one because he was going to be coming back soon.
That might be it. I don't think anybody else is particularly interesting.
Gibson, but I wouldn't even touch him when healthy, so that one doesn't matter too much.
Yeah, I honestly don't think there's anybody else that really matters.
Aside from the whole league, which
Jeff Carter.
No, he doesn't matter. He doesn't matter. Although the Kings are playing better, so maybe he does matter, but probably not.
That'd be funny if he came back and just lit it up.
Dominated. Very Carter Kings like to do, but
yeah, there's just
anyways,
nothing else. There's nothing else. It's not very interesting out there, except for the top 5 names or so.
So there you go. Hopefully that was helpful. hopefully it answered some questions. We've been pretty active on Twitter, answering anything that people have, like trying to resolve league questions, or just any questions you have in general about what's going to happen with the season. We'll try to give as much info as we have. But it's not much more than what you're going to find out there already, to be honest. So I guess that's it. We will hopefully see you soon. Keep an eye out for what's coming. The Razzies will certainly be coming. We'll try to do some way too early projections sort of stuff. That's it. So congratulations on getting through the weirdest fantasy hockey podcast episode ever.
Yeah. Thanks for listening.
Yeah. And thanks for listening. Weird. Oh, and I went after you. Wow. Yeah, this is a weird episode.
Yep.
Okay.
I'm just going to stop.
Me too.